A heart monitor shrill alarm pierced through the sterile silence of the pediatric ICU as 11-year-old Lily's vital signs plummeted beyond the point of return. Catherine Walsh watched in horror as the numbers on the screen painted a devastating picture. Respiratory failure, cardiac arrest imminent, and according to every medical calculation she had performed in her 18-year career, this brave little girl had perhaps 3 minutes left to live. What happened next would challenge everything the medical team thought they knew about healing, hope, and the extraordinary bond between a child and her four-legged guardian angel. Lily Thompson had been battling a catastrophic multi-organ inflammatory syndrome for 7 months. Her small body fighting a war against itself that even the most advanced treatments couldn't seem to win. Her parents, Jennifer and David, had exhausted their savings, their hope, and nearly their faith as they watched their vibrant daughter slowly fade away in the hospital bed at St. Michael's Regional Medical Center. But through it all, there had been one constant source of comfort and strength: a German shepherd named Duke, who had been Lily's loyal companion since her 6th birthday. Duke wasn't just a pet. He was Lily's shadow, her confidant, and her reason to smile even on the darkest days. The hospital had strict policies about animals in the critical care unit, but Dr. Walsh had witnessed something extraordinary in the weeks leading up to this critical moment. Every time Duke was allowed to visit, Lily's vitals would stabilize, her pain seemed to diminish, and a spark would return to her tired eyes. The nursing staff had begun to notice patterns. Lily's breathing would regulate when Duke laid his head on her bed. Her heart rate would calm when his warm presence filled the room, and her appetite would return after his visits. It was as if this gentle giant possessed some mysterious healing power that modern medicine couldn't explain or replicate. As Lily's condition deteriorated rapidly, that fateful Thursday evening, her parents made a heart-wrenching decision that would go against every hospital protocol. They smuggled Duke into the critical care unit, knowing that if their daughter was going to take her final breath, it should be with her beloved companion by her side. The 7-year-old German shepherd seemed to sense the gravity of the situation from the moment he entered the room. His usual alert demeanor was replaced by a solemn, protective stance as he approached Lily's bedside with careful, deliberate steps. The medical team was initially alarmed by the presence of the dog, but Dr. Walsh made a split-second decision that would haunt and inspire her for years to come. She allowed Duke to stay, understanding that sometimes compassion must override protocol, especially when conventional medicine had reached its limits. What unfolded over the next several minutes would become the stuff of medical legend, whispered about in hospital corridors and discussed in medical journals for decades to come. Duke approached Lily's bed with an urgency that seemed almost supernatural. He didn't jump or play as he normally would, but instead placed his massive paws gently on the edge of her bed and fixed his intelligent brown eyes on her pale face. The dog began to whimper softly, a sound that seemed to pierce through the mechanical beeping of the medical equipment. Then, in a moment that defied all explanation, Duke began to do something the medical staff had never witnessed before. He started to breathe in perfect synchronization with Lily's labored breathing, as if he was trying to will his own life force into her failing body. The heart monitor continued its ominous countdown, but something remarkable was happening. As Duke maintained his vigil, breathing deeply and steadily while never breaking eye contact with Lily, the girl's erratic breathing pattern began to stabilize. Her oxygen saturation levels, which had been dropping dangerously low, started to climb. The medical team watched in stunned silence as vital signs that had been spiraling towards certain death began to show signs of improvement. Dr. Walsh later described the scene as otherworldly, explaining how Duke seemed to be communicating with Lily on a level that transcended human understanding. The dog's breathing became more pronounced, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that seemed to guide Lily's own respiratory system back from the brink of failure. It was as if Duke was teaching her how to breathe again, how to fight, how to live. For 52 minutes, Duke maintained his position, never moving, never wavering, breathing life into his beloved companion through sheer force of will and love. The medical equipment that had been screaming warnings of impending death gradually quieted as Lily's vital signs stabilized and then began to improve. Her color returned, her breathing deepened, and for the first time in weeks, her eyes fluttered open. The transformation was so dramatic that Dr. Walsh ordered immediate additional testing, convinced that their equipment must be malfunctioning. But test after test confirmed what seemed impossible. Lily was not only stable, but actually improving. The inflammatory markers that had been destroying her body showed signs of regression. Her organ function was returning to normal ranges, and her pain levels had decreased significantly. Duke finally collapsed from exhaustion. His mission complete, but the damage to his own body was severe. The extraordinary effort he had expended to save Lily had taken a devastating toll on his aging heart. As Lily slowly recovered over the following weeks, making a miraculous comeback that baffled every medical professional involved in her care, Duke's condition deteriorated. It was as if he had somehow transferred his remaining years to the little girl who meant everything to him. The German Shepherd passed away peacefully 4 weeks later, surrounded by the Thompson family and a medical team that had witnessed something that challenged every principle of modern medicine. Lily, now on the road to full recovery, held Duke's paw as he took his final breath, whispering words of gratitude to the hero who had saved her life through an act of love so pure and selfless that it redefined what the doctors thought they knew about healing. If this story of ultimate sacrifice and unconditional love has touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others who need to be reminded of the incredible bonds that exist between humans and animals. Leave a comment telling us about your own experiences with the healing power of animal companionship. And don't forget to subscribe to Loyal Hearts for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary love our animal friends bring into our lives. Lily Thompson is now a healthy teenager, but she carries with her the memory of Duke's final gift and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from medicine or technology, but from the boundless love of a loyal heart. Dr. Walsh continues to study the phenomenon she witnessed that night, but she's learned that some miracles are meant to be felt rather than understood, experienced rather than explained, and cherished rather than questioned. The medical staff at St. Michael's Regional Medical Center still speaks of that Thursday evening in hushed, reverent tones. Nurses who were present that night describe an atmosphere that felt charged with something beyond medical science, a presence that seemed to fill the critical care unit with an inexplicable warmth despite the clinical coldness of the equipment and sterile surroundings. Dr. Walsh had been practicing medicine for 18 years, had witnessed countless medical procedures and unexpected outcomes, but nothing in her extensive training or experience had prepared her for what she observed during those critical 52 minutes. The synchronization between Duke's breathing and Lily's physiological responses defied every known principle of medical science. It was as if the German Shepherd had tapped into some primal communication system that existed beyond the reach of human understanding or technological measurement. In the weeks following the miraculous event, Dr. Walsh meticulously documented every detail she could remember. She reviewed the telemetry data dozens of times, searching for any rational explanation that might account for the impossible recovery. The cardiac monitors had recorded Lily's heart rate stabilizing in direct correlation with Duke's presence and breathing pattern. The oxygen saturation readings showed a steady climb that should have taken hours with mechanical ventilation, yet occurred in mere minutes with only the dog's influence. Other medical professionals who had witnessed the event were equally baffled. The respiratory therapist on duty that evening, a 25-year veteran named Marcus Chun, submitted his own detailed report describing how Lily's lung function improved in ways that contradicted every textbook he had ever studied. The pediatric intensivist, Dr. Sarah Ramirez, documented changes in Lily's inflammatory markers that should have required weeks of aggressive treatment, yet manifested within the span of Duke's vigil. Jennifer and David Thompson struggled to process the bittersweet reality of their situation. Their daughter had been returned to them from the very brink of death, a gift so profound that words seemed inadequate to express their gratitude. Yet this gift had come at a price they were only beginning to comprehend. Duke, who had been a vibrant, energetic companion just days before, now moved with the slow, labored gait of an animal whose body was failing. The veterinary cardiologist who examined him 3 days after the incident found extensive damage to his heart muscle, damage that appeared acute and catastrophic, as if he had sustained some massive physiological trauma. The veterinarian, Dr. Linda Hartwell, had treated Duke for routine care over the years and knew his medical history intimately. His heart had been perfectly healthy during his last checkup just 2 months prior. The sudden deterioration was medically inexplicable. The damage pattern didn't match any known cardiac disease or injury. It was as if his heart had been subjected to an extreme stress that burned through years of functional capacity in less than an hour. Dr. Hartwell shared her findings with Dr. Walsh, and the two physicians found themselves discussing possibilities that existed far outside the boundaries of conventional medical discourse. They spoke carefully, professionally, but beneath their clinical language lay a shared awareness that they had witnessed something that science could not adequately explain. Duke had somehow given his own vitality to sustain Lily during her most critical moments, and the cost of that gift was now becoming devastatingly apparent. Lily's recovery continued with a speed that astonished her medical team. Within a week, she was sitting up in bed, eating solid foods, and asking to see Duke. The inflammatory markers in her blood work had dropped to nearly normal levels. Her organ function tests showed remarkable improvement across every measure parameter. The specialists who had prepared her family for the worst now found themselves revising their prognosis with each passing day. Dr. Walsh watched this transformation with a mixture of professional satisfaction and profound unease, because with each improvement in Lily's condition, Duke's health declined proportionally. The Thompson family brought Duke to visit Lily as often as hospital policy would permit, which Dr. Walsh ensured was daily. During these visits, something extraordinary became visible to anyone paying close attention. When Duke entered Lily's room, both their vital signs would shift. Lily's heart rate would settle into a calm, steady rhythm, while Duke's would elevate slightly, as if he were still somehow supporting her recovery even in his weakened state. The nurses began documenting these synchronized responses, adding more data to a case file that was growing increasingly unusual. Lily seemed to understand, with a clarity beyond her years, what Duke had done for her. She would stroke his fur gently during their visits, whispering to him in soft tones that the adults couldn't quite hear. Her parents noticed that she never asked why Duke seemed so tired or why he moved so slowly. It was as if she knew, on some deep intuitive level, that his weakness and her strength were intrinsically connected. By the 3rd week, Duke could barely walk. David Thompson had to carry the large German shepherd into the hospital, cradling him with the same tenderness he had once used to carry his infant daughter. The dog's breathing had become labored, his eyes clouded with fatigue, but whenever he saw Lily, a spark of his old vitality would briefly return. He would lift his head, touch his nose to her hand, and for those brief moments, the roles would reverse. Now it was Lily who provided comfort and strength, her small hand resting on his head, her recovered voice speaking words of love and gratitude. Dr. Hartwell explained to the Thompson family that Duke's heart was failing irreversibly. The damage was too extensive, too complete. There were no surgical options, no medications that could reverse what had occurred. She estimated he had perhaps days, maybe a week at most. The family made the decision to keep him comfortable, to let him spend his remaining time surrounded by the people he loved, especially the little girl whose life he had saved. Lily was discharged from St. Michael's Regional Medical Center on a bright autumn afternoon, exactly 4 weeks after the night she had been given 3 minutes to live. Her medical team stood in the hallway as she walked out, a sight none of them had believed they would ever witness. She walked slowly, not from weakness, but because Duke was walking beside her, and she matched her pace to his labored steps. Dr. Walsh watched them leave, her eyes bright with tears she didn't bother to hide. She had seen many remarkable things in her career, but nothing that had moved her as profoundly as this small girl and her failing companion, their bond visible in every synchronized step they took together. That evening, Duke collapsed at home. The Thompson family rushed him to the emergency veterinary clinic, but Dr. Hartwell gently explained that his body had finally reached its limit. They brought him home, created a comfortable space in Lily's room, and prepared for the inevitable. Duke passed away peacefully 2 days later, on a quiet Saturday morning as the first light of dawn filtered through Lily's bedroom window. She was lying beside him, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the slow rhythm of his failing heart. Jennifer and David sat nearby, keeping vigil through the long night. When Duke took his final breath, Lily didn't cry. She simply leaned close to his ear and whispered "thank you" over and over, her voice steady and sure. The veterinary pathologist who performed Duke's post-mortem examination found cardiac damage that defied medical explanation. The tissue showed patterns of stress and depletion that typically required months or years to develop, yet had manifested in less than a month. She noted in her report that the damage appeared almost deliberate, as if the heart had been pushed far beyond its normal capacity for a specific, sustained purpose. She didn't speculate further in her official findings, but she shared her preliminary notes with Dr. Walsh, adding one more piece to the puzzle of what had transpired that Thursday evening. The funeral for Duke was attended by more than 50 people, an unprecedented gathering for a family pet. Nurses from St. Michael's came, bringing flowers and cards. Dr. Walsh spoke briefly, her voice breaking as she described Duke not as an animal, but as a healer whose methods transcended everything she had learned in medical school. Other families from the hospital's pediatric ward attended, parents whose children had been comforted by Duke during his visits, who had witnessed the gentle giant's extraordinary capacity for empathy and love. Lily stood beside Duke's grave in the family's backyard and placed a simple stone marker that read Duke, who gave everything. She didn't elaborate further. She didn't need to. Everyone present understood the profound truth contained in those simple words. In the months that followed, Dr. Walsh became somewhat obsessed with understanding what had happened. She reviewed medical literature spanning centuries, searching for documented cases of similar phenomena. She found scattered reports throughout history, anecdotes of animals who seemed to sense impending death, who stayed with dying patients, and somehow provided comfort that extended beyond mere companionship. There were stories from battlefield medics who swore that therapy dogs could stabilize traumatized soldiers in ways that medication could not. There were accounts from hospice workers who described pets who would sit with dying patients, their presence seeming to ease the transition from life to death. But nothing she found fully explained what she had witnessed with Lily and Duke. The synchronization of breathing, the measurable improvement in vital signs, the apparent transfer of vitality from animal to child, these elements suggested something far more profound than simple emotional comfort. It suggested a connection that operated on a biological level, a form of communication or energy exchange that modern science had no framework to understand or measure. Dr. Walsh presented her findings at a regional medical conference, carefully framing her observations in clinical language while acknowledging the limitations of scientific explanation. Her presentation was met with skepticism from some colleagues who suggested psychological factors or coincidental timing. But others listened with intense interest, particularly those who had their own unexplained experiences with animal-assisted therapy and healing. The case of Lily Thompson and Duke began to circulate through medical networks, shared in quiet conversations between physicians who had witnessed things that didn't fit neatly into diagnostic categories. It became a touchstone for discussions about the limitations of purely mechanistic approaches to healing, about the potential for connections and influences that existed beyond the reach of current medical technology to measure or explain. St. Michael's Regional Medical Center revised its policies regarding animal visitation in critical care units. While maintaining necessary safety protocols, the hospital created pathways for therapy animals to visit seriously ill patients, particularly in pediatric wards. The program was named in Duke's honor, and a small plaque in the critical care waiting area featured his photograph alongside a quote from Dr. Walsh about the healing power of unconditional love. Lily returned to school that fall, her recovery so complete that her classmates who hadn't seen her during her illness could scarcely believe she had been near death just months before. She excelled in her studies, participated in sports, and lived the normal, active life of a healthy child. But she was changed in ways that weren't visible on medical charts or physical examinations. She spoke often about Duke, keeping his memory alive through stories shared with friends and family. She volunteered at the local animal shelter, spending her weekends walking dogs and socializing cats. Drawn to the animals that others overlooked, the older ones, the shy ones, the ones whose value wasn't immediately apparent. She seemed to see something in them that others missed, a capacity for love and connection that transcended physical appearance or social popularity. On the anniversary of Duke's death, Lily wrote an essay for her English class titled "The Gift I Could Never Repay." In it, she described not just the medical miracle that had saved her life, but the deeper lesson Duke had taught her about sacrifice, about the nature of love that gives without expecting return, about bonds that transcend the boundaries between species, and perhaps even between life and death itself. Her teacher shared the essay with the school administration, and it was eventually published in a local newspaper. The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from families who had similar stories, who had witnessed the extraordinary healing power of animal companionship, who had experienced losses and miracles they couldn't fully explain but knew in their hearts were real. Dr. Walsh kept a copy of Lily's essay in her office, reading it whenever she felt discouraged by the limitations of medical science, whenever she needed to remember that healing encompassed far more than what could be measured or prescribed. It reminded her that some of the most powerful medicines couldn't be found in pharmacies or administered through 4 lines. 5 years after that Thursday evening, Lily Thompson stood at a podium in the same hospital where she had nearly died, participating in a ceremony dedicating the new Duke Thompson Animal Therapy Center. She was 16 now, healthy and strong, her future stretching before her with possibilities that had once seemed impossible. She spoke about her companion, about the debt she could never repay, and about her commitment to honoring his sacrifice by living fully, by loving deeply, and by never forgetting that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from what we can explain, but from what we can only marvel at and cherish.